Before I continue this series, I want to address something that has become very clear to me. Since these videos started, I've heard a lot about resolution, counsel, and elder involvement. What I haven't seen is urgency. Deacon called me after episode 1, and within minutes, Elder Jediah was able to reach out. Brother Hassad previously told me he was working on a plan, wanted to bring my father into a counseling discussion, and wanted to talk about what accountability and support would look like moving forward. But once I continued telling my story, all of that seemed to disappear. And that's what I find interesting, because where was this urgency before the videos, when I was asking for help? Where was the urgency when I was struggling financially? Where was the urgency when I told people I was at risk of losing housing? Where was the urgency when our daughter was going weeks without contact from her father? Nobody seems interested in discussing those things. Nobody is asking, do you have enough for rent, diapers, how's the baby doing, what would accountability actually look like? Instead, the focus seems to be on stopping the conversation. Deacon agreed in front of me and my parents to provide $1,000 per month in support. That happened once, and then it stopped. Hassad also assured me certain commitments would be honored. They weren't. Leviticus 19:11 says, "Ye shall not steal, neither deal falsely." So my question is simple. Who's holding Deacon accountable? Who's holding him accountable as a husband, as a father, as a leader? Because from where I'm standing, it appears many people are hoping this will simply blow over, people will move on, and Deacon will eventually return online as if none of this ever happened. My issue has never been that I'm a bitter woman. My issue is that I was manipulated, mistreated, financially harmed, and a child was brought into this situation who is now largely being ignored. Resolution is not a call after a video is released. Resolution is accountability, resolution is action, and resolution is changed behavior. And if we're being honest, I have yet to see much of that from Deacon, Hassad, or the elders he claims to be accountable to. To my knowledge, Deacon has not publicly addressed his alcoholism, sought real therapy, attended AA, made meaningful restitution, or demonstrated any sustained changes in his behavior. Most importantly, I have not seen meaningful change in his role as a father. The same concerns that existed before these videos are the same concerns that exist today. That is why words alone are no longer enough for me. Through all of this, I want to make one thing clear. My faith in Yahweh has not been shaken. If anything, it has grown stronger. Men can fail, leaders can fail, teachers can fail, but Yahweh does not fail. Throughout this entire process, He has sustained me, protected my daughter, and given me the strength to continue speaking even when it would have been easier to stay silent. Lastly, I've seen many people asking how they can support me. Please do not send me money. I'm not asking for donations, Cash App payments, or GoFundMes. The public should not have to carry another man's responsibility. The best way to support me is by subscribing, liking, commenting, and sharing the videos so this story does not quietly disappear. I didn't come here for handouts. I came here to tell the truth. I came here because I don't believe what happened should be hidden. I came here because I don't want people manipulated by the same patterns I experienced. I read the comments. I see the messages. I'm not ignoring anyone. My email is available for those who want to reach out personally, and once the series is complete, I'll be open to interviews, live streams, and answering questions. For now, my focus is finishing the story. Thank you to everyone who has listened, supported, shared, and shown kindness to me and my daughter.
Yeah, I stayed through a lot, way more than I should've. But everybody got a line, and you crossed mine. Let's talk about it. You crossed the line when you put your hands on me. Positive on the screen, now nothing looked the same. You crossed the line, thought I'd stay and take the blame. Positive on the screen, now nothing looked the same. So my car, you took the money, said no worries, I got you honey. Kept hearing next week till next week, turned into another week, added to the bank account. Nope, now I'm asking too many questions. I can't ask questions about the things you promised me. Now I'm disrespectful, contentious, rebellious, wicked. Stay quiet or speak up, still get blamed for it. I'm the proud and funny how the story changed as soon as everything transferred into your name. I wanted answers, instead I got counsels and separations. Every promise came with excuses. Every issue got redirected. Every concern got deflected. You didn't lie, you just changed your mind. And every time I stayed through the pressure, stayed through the rants and insults, stayed through the separation, stayed trying to protect us. But every time I brought up facts, you ran from the truth. Truth is, we could have been in the booth, creating a classic, making magic. Let me stop, I'm being dramatic. Everyone already knows how tragic. You crossed the line when you put your hands on me. Positive on the screen, now nothing looked the same. You crossed the line, thought I'd stay and take the blame. Positive on the screen, now nothing looked the same. 7 weeks pregnant, door kicked open, fear hit different, reality spoken. This ain't about pride, this ain't about winning, it's about protecting what was precious inside me. You thought I'd keep shrinking and sinking, thought you would mold me, train to fold me. You couldn't hold me to a standard you couldn't even meet. Man, you look so weak. That night changed everything, that line got crossed. Now every decision I made was about the life we made. Restraining order, headed back home, south of the border, back to my loved ones. Whole time you thought a baby and money would keep me trapped and wrapped, bound tightly within your need for control. Whole time I was learning you became not that hard to figure out. I stayed through the disrespect longer than people know. I tried more than people know. I forget more than people know. But once that line gets crossed, you can't uncross it. When you put your hands on me, positive on the screen, now nothing looked the same. You crossed the line, thought I'd stay and take the blame. Positive on the screen, now nothing looked the same. I stayed through the lies, stayed through the fight. You crossed the line, and you put your hands on me. When that seed was planted, I realized you took me for granted. You forced me to choose, I chose our child. And because of your actions, another child, you lost in another one. And another one.
Before I talk about my pregnancy, I need people to understand the situation I was already in when I found out I was pregnant. Because the pregnancy didn't create the problems, it exposed them. By February 2024, when I found out I was pregnant, I was already in a very bad position emotionally, financially, and mentally. The relationship was already unstable, the financial issues had already happened, the promises had already been broken, the control had already been established. And looking back now, I can see that my pregnancy didn't start in a loving, stable marriage. It started in survival mode. By January 2024, I had just learned how much my workers' compensation settlement was going to be, and something quietly shifted inside me. I already knew I couldn't give him that money. I had already sent disability payments week after week. I had already handed over savings. I had already watched my credit be used. I had already been promised things that never happened. I had already been told I would be added to the bank accounts, and by that point, I knew that if my settlement ended up in his hands, I might never financially recover. So I started preparing quietly. I didn't announce it. I didn't threaten to leave. I didn't make some dramatic statement. I just started trying to repair my credit behind the scenes because I knew I needed to be ready for whatever came next. At the same time, he had me sell my car. He framed it like it was the smart financial decision. He said it would reduce expenses, and he said I can drive the Mercedes he put in my name whenever I needed to. So I sold my car. I made about $2,000, and that money didn't stay with me. He took it too. And then after my car was gone, he started acting like I was asking to use the Mercedes too much. I remember thinking, how am I asking for it too much? You're the one who told me to sell my car. I literally don't have a vehicle anymore. So now I'm in Washington, away from my family, away from my support system, dependent on him for transportation, dependent on him financially, and still dealing with my injury. And I hadn't even found out I was pregnant yet. And at that point, we were already on a separation. And that separation came from the bank account issue. Since September, I had been asking about being added to the bank account because that was one of the original promises. From the beginning, I was told that as his wife, I was required to give him my money because he would be in charge of all the finances. In return, I would be added to the account. That was the agreement. But once he had my money, everything started changing. Every time I followed up, Every time I asked questions, every time I wanted clarity, every time I wanted accountability, somehow it became conflict. It got to the point where even in front of my dad and chief, he said he would add me the following week. So naturally, I followed up. And instead of following through, I started getting put on separations. Looking back, those separations felt less like discipline and more like a way to avoid answering questions. Because when you're on separation, you're not really supposed to communicate. So by January, we were already stuck in this cycle: promise, no follow through, questions, conflict, separation, repeat. And over time, I started noticing something else. Whenever I brought up concerns I had about him, somehow the conversations would stop being about what I was saying and start becoming about everything that was supposedly wrong with me. He had actually told me before that if somebody wanted to say they had a problem with him, he was going to make a list of problems that he had with them that was much worse than whatever issues they had with him. And looking back, that's exactly what it felt like happened. Because before I started questioning where the money was going, before I started asking about the bank account, before I started asking for accountability, there weren't all these major complaints about me. Suddenly, after I started speaking up, I became disrespectful. I became disobedient. I became out of order. I became rebellious, and I became the problem. And that's why the separation started making less and less sense to me, because it didn't feel like I was being separated for some ongoing behavior that had been there all along. It felt like I was being punished for speaking up. Every time I raised an issue, suddenly there was an issue with me. Every time I asked a question, suddenly I was out of order. Every time I wanted accountability, suddenly I needed correction. So instead of resolving the concerns I was bringing forward, the focus would shift onto my attitude, my conduct, my submission, or my respect. And once I noticed that pattern, it became hard to ignore. But here's what made it even more confusing. Even though we were supposedly on separation, it never felt like a real separation. The separation applied to me when I needed support. It applied when I wanted communication. It applied when I wanted stability, reassurance, answers, accountability, or resolution. But it didn't seem to apply when he wanted something from me. It didn't stop him from showing up at my apartment late at night. It didn't stop him from expecting me to be available. It didn't stop him from wanting intimacy. It didn't stop him from actively trying to get me pregnant. And that's what made it so confusing. Because if we're truly separated, then why wasn't the separation consistent? Why was I being treated like I was too separated for support, too separated for partnership, too separated for security, but not too separated when he wanted access to me? I wasn't receiving emotional support. I wasn't receiving financial security. I wasn't receiving stability. I wasn't receiving the benefits of a marriage, but he still expected access to my body. And over time, that started feeling less like separation and more like a situation where the rules changed depending on what he wanted in that moment. And by that point, even the conversations around money had changed. I remember him asking me in January if I would be upset if I had to go back to work. And the answer was yes. Not because I didn't want to contribute, but because he met me disabled. He knew I wasn't working when we got together. He knew I was receiving disability payments. Yet, after months of collecting those payments and after I had already given him well over $35,000, the expectation was now shifting towards each wife contributing around $1,000 a month. I had already contributed far more than I ever expected to contribute. So, in my mind, the last thing I should have been worried about was how I was going to bring in even more money. Looking back, that's also part of why the tax refund situation was so frustrating for me. People hear that story and think I was refusing to give him money. I wasn't. So in February 2024, I found out I was pregnant. And right before I found out, I had filed my taxes. My refund was supposed to hit on February 29th. Instead, it arrived on February 28th around 9 p.m. since we're on Pacific time and the banks were on Eastern time. And almost immediately after it hit, he called me. I kid you not, 9:02, my phone was ringing. He was on his way to the bar, not calling to check on me, not calling to ask how I was doing, not calling to talk about our relationship. He just called to ask if the deposit had arrived. I told him yes. He asked how much. I told him it was 1423, and at first he said to send him 1300. I asked if I could keep some of it. I asked if I can send him 1,000 instead. And one of the reasons I suggested that number was because he had already been saying each wife should be contributing around $1,000 a month anyway. So, from my perspective, I was still contributing. I was still sending money. I was still compromising, not because I wanted to hide money, not because I was trying to be rebellious, not because I wanted to spend recklessly. I simply wanted some money in my own account. Enough money so that if I needed groceries, needed gas, needed to buy something small, or wanted to get my nails done, I didn't have to stand at the register texting him and waiting for him to decide whether or not to send the exact dollar amount. Because that had already become my reality and it was humiliating. When I explained that, he changed it and said I can send the entire 1400. He told me I didn't need money sitting in my account. He said I could just ask him whenever I needed something. I pointed out that he had a bunch of money just sitting in his account and he spent money whenever he wanted. And that's when he said, I spend a couple $100s a day. You're telling me you want to spend a couple $100s a day? I told him no, that's not what I was saying. And that's when he snapped. I'm not about to argue with you, bitch. Just send me the fucking money. And he hung up. I didn't send it, not because I refused, not because I was trying to keep it forever. I didn't send it because, from my perspective, we hadn't even agreed on what I was keeping and what I was sending. So a little while later, he called back. Now I was disobedient. Now I was disrespectful. Now he wanted another separation. Mind you, we had only been off separation for 3 days. I told him this was getting ridiculous and that we needed somebody else involved. He called Chief. We talked, and even then, there was no accountability for the way he had spoken to me. It just became another conversation about separation. Eventually, he switched again. He said I could keep all the tax money, that he didn't even want it, that he just wanted distance from me. Chief ultimately decided that since I was not in agreement with the separation, that he would not grant one. So my husband pretty much let both of us know that he didn't want to be around me and that even if he didn't take my days away for the next couple of weeks, he didn't want me to sleep over and he didn't even want to touch me. So I was basically going to go over on my days, be a servant, and be emotionally and physically neglected. At that point, I didn't care anymore. He was doing everything possible to make me isolated and lonely. So I accepted that was pretty much the end of the conversation. By then, it was late. I had an ultrasound appointment the next morning and needed the car. Around 1:30 in the morning before I was going to sleep, I texted him reminding him. He called, and as the night went on, he had become more intoxicated. He said he was going to leave the keys on the tire because he didn't want to see me. I asked him not to do that. I was pregnant. It was freezing. It was raining. It was the middle of the night. I asked him to at least leave the keys at my doormat. After going back and forth, he finally agreed. But then the conversation continued. He brought the money up again. He said, I hope you're happy with your $1,400. He started talking about things he wasn't going to pay for, and I kept telling him I was tired and I didn't want to talk about it anymore. He said I wasn't going to tell him what he could and couldn't talk about. Then he started comparing me to his other wives. He said, my other wives would never do no faggot ass shit like this. He talked about how they gave him their tax returns without question. I reminded him that he was the one who had just said I could keep the money and that all I had asked was to keep a small portion of it. While I was trying to explain, he kept telling me to shut the F up, telling me I didn't need to say anything back, that I just needed to do what he said. Then came the insults. Bitch, punk ass bitch, hoe, ugly. So I hung up. A few seconds later, he called back. Still angry, still yelling, still cussing. I told him that he was stressing me out. It's not good for me being so early in my pregnancy and that I was done talking. I said, please just leave the keys and go home. He said I didn't decide when the conversation was over, calling me every name but a child of God. And after about 40 seconds of him screaming at me again, telling me he was going to come over to my apartment and choke me and that no one was going to stop him, and the 20th time he called me a bitch, I finally snapped. I said, stop talking to me like that. What's your problem? Are you looking in the mirror or something? That was enough. He told me he was on his way and that I was going to come outside and say it to his face. At first, I honestly thought he was just angry and drunk, but when I heard the engine roar as he revved it, I knew his foot was applying 100% pressure to that gas pedal, and he was speeding over to my place. He hung up on me. That's when the situation shifted for me because up until that point, it had been yelling, it had been insults, it had been cussing, it had been financial control and threats of separation. But now he was saying he was coming to my place in the middle of the night while I was pregnant after being out drinking because he was angry about something that I said on the phone, a conversation he started and that he escalated. I called my best friend to tell her what was going on, and she stayed on the phone with me. He got to my apartment around 10, 15 minutes later. He called me and told me to come outside, and I told him no, so he said he was coming upstairs. I panicked and I told him not to, but he hung up already. I heard his footsteps coming up the stairs, and I was on the phone with my friend still, and she told me to grab a chair and shove it under the handle so we couldn't open the door. So I did. He was fumbling with the lock because I was holding it down, hoping he couldn't turn the key, but ultimately he was able to turn it and unlock the deadbolt. He still couldn't get in because I had barricaded it with the chair. But once I saw he was still trying to push his way inside, I sat on the chair to add more weight to it and kept trying to turn the deadbolt back to lock. He then kicked my door open. I went sliding with the chair. He forced his way inside and damaged the lock and the door. Once he got in, he grabbed me by my shirt and pushed me back into the counter while screaming in my face. He was literally spitting on me while he was yelling, so I put my hands up to try to block it from getting in my face. He grabbed my wrist and he kept pushing me back over the counter. He stepped on my foot and he smashed his foot down on top of mine. I was able to pull away and get to the other side of the counter in the kitchen, and then I went into the bathroom. At that point, I was scared. I was pregnant. It was the middle of the night. I had no family there. I had no real support system there, and he had just forced his way to my he had just forced his way into my apartment. He had driven the Mercedes there, the car that was in my name, and then he demanded that I take him back to his house. I agreed because I needed him out of my apartment and I needed possession of the vehicle. I knew if he left with that car, I would be stuck. So even in that moment, while I was scared, I was still thinking about survival. I was thinking I needed him out of here and I need to get my vehicle back. I put my clothes on so I could go outside. When we got into the car, I was in the passenger seat and he was driving. And he kept going on and on, insulting me, telling me that I wanted to talk like a nigga when we were on the phone, but now that he was in my face, I didn't have anything to say. He was taunting me, saying that since I wanted to talk to him like a nigga, he was going to treat me like a nigga. We hadn't even been in the car for more than 2 minutes. At one point during his rant, I asked him, "What did I say? What did I do?" And when I asked that, he slammed on the brakes, reached over with his right hand, and punched me in the chest. The impact was hard enough that it immediately hurt. It shocked me. I remember feeling pain shoot through my chest and feeling completely caught off guard by what had just happened. I was pregnant, I was sitting in the passenger seat, and the man who was supposed to protect me had just hit me. Before I could even process it, he grabbed my shirt and started pulling me towards him. I screamed for him to let me go and I pulled away. That's when I started going off, asking him what his problem was, that he had just punched me while I was pregnant and that something was seriously wrong with him, and that he needed help. He kept driving towards his house, still insulting me, still threatening me, still making me feel like I had somehow caused what just happened. He said that I was so ugly and not even his type. That's when he said he was going to pay somebody $20,000 to just get rid of me. He kept saying things to make me feel like nobody was going to protect me. Nobody was going to ride for me. And like there would be no consequences for what he did to me. We were about 2 minutes away from his house and he switched up his tone. He started saying I should just call the police now if he punched me. That if I really thought he punched me, then I should just go ahead and report it because he should be in jail. I know he was saying that to try to distort my memory. He was attempting to gaslight me and make me think that what was happening was not what actually happened. He was trying to use religion as control. He kept saying he knew I was going to call the police and that I was going to run to Esau. And I kept telling him I wasn't going to. I just wanted to go home. When we got to his house, he got out of the car, but he stayed standing in the doorway so I couldn't close the door and leave. He kept belittling me. He told me I was going to be a single mother. I told him I was feeling sick, my chest hurt, and that I needed to go back home and lay down. I didn't feel good. I said I was feeling too stressed and that I can have a miscarriage because of all this stress. And then he said something I will never forget. He said he was a prophet of God and he was prophesying that I was going to have a miscarriage. I had just found out I was pregnant. I was already scared and overwhelmed, and now this man is standing here after everything that just happened, telling me I was going to be a single mother and prophesying that I was going to have a miscarriage. He refused to give me the second set of keys to my own car. He would not let me shut the door and leave. He kept me there until I finally agreed to send him the tax refund. Once I agreed, he moved and he let me leave. This all happened at about 7 weeks pregnant. And I need people to really sit with that because at that point, this was no longer just verbal, mental, or financial. This was no longer just him being controlling, rude, disrespectful, manipulative, or financially abusive. I was pregnant. I was isolated. I had no car of my own anymore. I had no family around me. I had no real support system there. And now the abuse had escalated physically while I was carrying his child. After that, I made it back to my place. I had to try to fix my door as best I could so it would at least lock and I could sleep comfortably knowing my door wasn't open all night. I was able to unscrew the lock cover and use a hammer to bend the latch back so the door would shut fully. It was locked, but if anyone pushed the door, it would open pretty easily, so I had to call the complex maintenance to fix it the next day. Anyway, that took about 10 minutes. Over that time, he kept texting me. He kept insulting me and pressuring me about the tax money, saying I was a liar for saying that I was going to send the money when he let me leave and that I was going to be a single mother. Eventually, I sent the money and I stopped responding. I was so shaken up, I was nauseous, and I was exhausted. I checked back in with my friend who had been on the phone earlier, and after talking with her, I was able to fall asleep for about 2 hours. I was running on fumes, but I still got up and went to my ultrasound appointment. This was my first time ever seeing an ultrasound of a tiny flickering heartbeat. And all the tech kept saying was how strong it was. I asked if we could listen, and she told me they don't usually allow listening, but that she would turn the sound on for just a few seconds. Hearing my baby's heartbeat for the first time at that appointment gave me a whole new wind of energy. From that point forward, I was only thinking about how I could protect the little life growing inside me. I had called my mom to check in with her because the last thing she had heard from me the night before was that he called me pressuring me about the tax money. She kept telling me not to send it, so when I talked to her again the next day, it took everything in me to bring myself to tell her that I had sent the tax money after everything he had done to me. I had to tell her I was pregnant. I had to sit there understanding my mother was heartbroken to hear this news, that not only had I been physically harmed, but that I was also pregnant by this man. And he knew it. She immediately told me she was not going to keep this from my dad and that he would be home from his out of town work trip the next day and that I needed to tell him what was going on. So that was the plan. I just had to lay low and make it till the next day so I could tell my dad what happened. Once my husband woke up that afternoon, he picked up right where he left off. It felt like I could not get away from him mentally or emotionally. Even after I left the house, even after I was back in my own space, I still felt trapped. I felt so anxious. I felt so sick. I was still being pulled into calls. I was still being forced to respond. I was still dealing with the pressure, the fear, and the emotional aftermath of what had just happened. During one of those calls, he put Alizar on the phone with us. Of course, he denied punching me and kicking my door. He also denied saying he was going to pay someone $20,000 to get rid of me. He said that I had threatened him, that my family had gang affiliation, and that they would be coming after him. He basically denied everything. And Alizar asked if I wanted a separation. At that point, I said no because that wasn't going to fix anything. What I really wanted was to leave the relationship. Of course, my husband laughed about that. He said we needed to be on a separation. Alizar agreed that things were too volatile for us to be around each other. Right before that call was over, my husband made a statement saying depending on which car his date wanted to take, he might be coming to pick up the Mercedes that's in my name instead of driving his G-Wagon that night. That disgusted me. I told him he was pathetic. I had no other words for how sick and twisted he was. Eventually, after he hung up, I decided I was not going to give him that car back again. The next morning, when I called my mom back, she put my dad on the line and I told him what happened. He told me I needed to get back to California, that he was tired of finding out these things and it was just getting worse and worse. He said he's not able to protect me being states away and that I needed to get back to California ASAP. So imagine that conversation. I'm not just calling my parents saying I'm pregnant, I'm telling them I'm pregnant and I'm telling them what had just happened. I'm telling them about the violence, the fear, the threats, the financial control, the car situation, the instability, everything. And of course, they urged me to come home. After everything I had been through in such a short amount of time, after the counseling calls, after my dad finally heard what was really going on, after it became clear that the abuse had escalated while I was pregnant, I knew myself that I needed to get out of Washington. I was not leaving because I didn't want my marriage. I was not leaving because I wanted to be a single mother. I was not leaving because I was trying to keep him from his child. I was leaving because I was pregnant and I did not feel safe. I was leaving because I needed to get myself into a position where I had support, where I had family, where I had somewhere to go, and where I was not isolated. That is what pushed me to get help. I stopped sharing my location and I blocked him. I went to my complex to tell them what happened, that the door needed to be fixed and that I needed to break my lease. They said they needed a copy of my police report and restraining order in order to do that with no penalty, just the rent balance up to the day that I was leaving. So I went and filed a police report and got the temporary restraining order. Once he was served with the restraining order, he called the bank and reversed the car payment on the Mercedes that was in my name. So now I'm on a clock. The late payment is coming. Risk of repo is coming. My credit is about to take another hit. And remember, I had already sold my car because he told me to. But now, after everything that happened, he reversed the payment on the car that was in my name. So not only had I been physically and emotionally shaken, but now my credit and transportation were being threatened too. And the only reason that did not completely destroy me is because, like I said earlier, I had already started fixing my credit behind his back. I had already started preparing quietly because something in me knew I needed to be ready for anything. I reached out to a domestic violence advocate and they helped me with the rent, and they had placed me in a hotel because I was not safe in my own apartment anymore. And I need people to understand how serious that felt for me. I had already been alone in Washington, away from my family, away from my friends, and now even my apartment was not safe. The place that was supposed to be mine, the place I was supposed to be able to go to and close the door and breathe, didn't even feel like protection anymore because he had a key and he already forced his way in once. He also had my spare car key and could come take the car out of my parking space at any time. During that time, I spoke with another leader in his organization. Captain Tazama was my friend's husband and third in command at the time. And even though talking to him helped me put things into perspective, in reality, what I got was more protection of the system instead of actual support. I was advised not to go through with the permanent restraining order. I was told not to go to court, not to talk to detectives, not to cooperate with anything. I was told that we're not supposed to deal with our enemies, meaning the police and the court system, and that these matters should be handled internally. Basically, I was told to be alone, enjoy my pregnancy, move on, and don't pursue anything further. But nobody was really addressing the fact that I had no money, no resources, no stability, no car, no support system in Washington, and that I had just been physically abused while pregnant. At the time, I listened. I decided that because I was leaving the state anyways, I didn't need to pursue a permanent restraining order. And I want to be honest about my mindset at that time. I wasn't trying to keep him away from our child. I wasn't thinking I'm going to disappear and never let him be involved. I was thinking I need to be safe during this pregnancy. I need distance. I need support. I need to get out of this environment. And I want to address something I've been seeing in the comments. A lot of people keep saying I should have stayed, that I should have endured, that I should have worked things out with my husband, that I gave up too easily. But if you have actually listened to this series from the beginning, I hope you can see that is not what happened. By this point, I had already stayed through the financial issues. I stayed through the broken promises. I stayed through the bank account situation. I stayed through the separation. I stayed through the verbal abuse. I stayed through the intimidation. I stayed through being isolated from my family and my support system. I stayed through being told to be more quiet, more submissive, more understanding, more patient, more respectful. I stayed through all of that. So once it came time to leave, my dad flew to Washington. I picked him up from the airport, packed what I could in the trunk in the backseat of the Mercedes, and we hit the road. It took us a whole day to get back to California. At that time, I was around 9 weeks pregnant. The day after I got back, my aunt helped me get another car immediately before my credit would take a hit. That part matters to me because I don't want this story told like I was just blindly going along with everything. I was scared, yes. I was controlled, yes. I was manipulated, yes. I was in a very vulnerable position, yes. But I was also trying to think ahead. I was trying to survive. I was trying to make moves quietly because I knew I could not rely on him. So when people say I should have stayed and tried harder, what they're missing is that I did stay. I did try repeatedly in many ways. This entire series is a story of how long I kept trying before I finally accepted that trying by yourself cannot fix a situation the other person refuses to change. I did not walk away at the first problem. I did not walk away at the 10th problem. And I definitely did not go public before exhausting every private option I could think of. At that point, in March, I had no contact with him. I was back in California. I was trying to stabilize myself. I was trying to process what happened. I was trying to get through the first trimester. I was trying to protect my peace and protect my baby.